Hello and welcome to this edition of Inside Tacoma. I'm your host, Randall Lewis. Our guest for our conversation today, City Council Member Ryan Mello. Welcome back.
Thanks, Randy.
We wanted to just kind of catch up with you and kind of set the pace for 2018 as past elections now, new mayor, new council members, lots of new ideas on the agenda. And so we want to get to what you want to accomplish, but I want to spend a little time on something that's been in the news recently, and we want to kind of see if we can bring some closure to. Have we successfully entered a new era at Point Ruston, where we might see some actual progress on both sides of the city limits?
I really do. I'm really excited about this. So we've a group of us negotiated what I think is a very fair compromise to bring some certainty to the forward movement on Point Ruston. You go down there on almost any given day, especially on a beautiful summer day, and people just love it. It is swarming with people enjoying live music and restaurants and the water walk and the beautiful Puget Sound. So, but we've had a stalemate in any sort of progress on the Ruston side, as you know. So we've reached agreement where now the city of Tacoma will be doing all of the permitting and inspection, which we fully expect to bring more certainty and predictability, where you're going to see just as beautiful of buildings that are going to house people and have more entertainment and restaurant destinations.
Right. I think the oddest moment for me when all of that was going on, and there was some acrimony and there was some legislative activity and all that, but the oddest moment for me was some sort of implication that because things have gone on in the Tacoma side and not on the Ruston side, that was because Tacoma has just lax standards and just lets anything go flying up and doesn't really care about safety or any of that kind of nonsense.
Yeah,
that kind of was insulting. I know a lot of people work in our permit section and the inspection sections, and they're very serious about their jobs.
They are. Our fire chief and fire marshal take their job incredibly seriously, and they do first-class work. And our building department takes their job incredibly seriously. So we have a team of professionals. They're up to the task, just like everything else we're doing in Tacoma, where we now are seeing several cranes in the sky. Thank goodness. But unfortunately, the town of Ruston doesn't have any full-time permitting staff. So I guess it's understandable why they couldn't be up to the task of permitting such a large project. It's about another $800 million of investment there. Our team has the professional staff, the bandwidth, and the capacity to do this, and I think it's going to be a great path forward.
Right. I mean, I know people know that, but a lot of inspectors have to sign these things. Their professional reputation is on the line, and their licensing and all that sort of stuff is on the line when they sign these permits. So it isn't just something that you casually just do and,
exactly.
Oh yeah, go do what you want.
Exactly right.
So yeah. So okay. So we began the year with that controversy. Here we are in February, and it's kind of over. So let's see if we can move on to some other stuff that is on the agenda. We also kind of ended 2017 with some discussions about the future of the port area. Some interim regulations were adopted, and then the idea of an even broader look at the area with a sub-area plan. Now, that hasn't begun yet.
It hasn't. I'm hopeful that in the next month or so, we're going to formally kick off this detailed planning of the entire Tide Flats area. So, we're working hard to bring partners to the table, get agreement about the planning process, invite stakeholders in and make a really inclusive and transparent process for all folks who think, very differently on all sides about what the future of the Tide Flats should be. The Tide Flats will remain an industrial area, a manufacturing industrial center. That's the center of so many important jobs. I think the question is, what kind of manufacturing industrial center and what kinds of uses are appropriate in an industrial manufacturing area for a growing metropolitan urban region? That's the central question. And really the sub-area planning, I think, should really focus on how do we make our vision a reality? So that detailed planning is about figuring out what are the transportation investments, the utility investments that are needed, who pays for them, when do they go in, and all those really detailed questions. That is the purpose of detailed planning like this, that I think will pay dividends for our economic future.
You mentioned it'll always be an industrial area. It'll also always be a container port. Because it has those advantages. It's railroads, it's deep water, natural deep water. It will always be that. But as the Port of Tacoma is fond of saying itself, and in lots of public meetings, they're just one of many property owners. And what we call the port area is really lowercase p port, not capital P port, because there's a lot of property owners down there who do a lot of different things.
Exactly. So that's why a lot of the terminology now is turning to tide flats versus port, because of the confusion that you just illustrated. So the foundation and the starting place is it will be a container port. Deep water and access to that water and how important that is to our trade economy, that is the starting place for conversation. So now the question is, how do we enhance that, and how do we make sure that we are a very prosperous exporting, importing port long to the future, and what kind of manufacturing is appropriate for, again, such a urban metropolitan region.
And the sub-area planning may be new to some of the industrial folks, or like the port itself, which isn't a planning agency. It does what it does, which is economic development and container terminals. But the city's a planning agency. The city's done sub-area planning, which is kind of a new kind of intensive, deep look at various areas of the city. We're wrapping one up right about now, the Tacoma Mall area. And I just want to contrast that, because I know there's some fears and some unknowns in the port area, but when you look at the Tacoma Mall area, that's also an area that's facing some changes. Malls were a thing of the 60s, but as you look across the country, and even here in this region, malls are either evolving or they're dying. And we certainly don't want the Tacoma Mall and all of the retail that it represents around that area to die. We want it to evolve into what it needs to continue to be for the next 50 years. And that sub-area plan, the Tacoma Mall's ownership, which is a corporation based way back east somewhere, participated very actively in the development of that plan.
Yeah, they've come to the table with really constructive ideas and have indicated that the Simon Company, who owns and operates the Tacoma Mall, has indicated that they share a vision that we share at City Hall, which is to turn the mall into a much more walkable and exciting place that has people living there and more entertainment there. So a lot more like what you see maybe in Northgate or South Center Mall, if folks have been there. A lot more attractive, a lot more people oriented, and a lot of different uses really centered in one place. So it's very people centered. So they share that vision, and we're really excited about that. And this mall deep planning is yes for the mall, but also the neighborhood directly surrounding the mall, from about South Tacoma Way to the freeway, the mall to about Costco. That's generally the geography that we're planning for. And what's important to understand is we're creating a plan that expects, in this area alone, 8,000 more people to be living there in the next 20 years. That is a big feat, to figure out how do you plan a community that is still very humane for people, and more jobs and a better place to live for 8,000 more people. So that takes careful planning and rethinking, reimagining this place. The current environment can't do it as it is today. There needs to be significant upgrades.
Right, and there have been residential units. I mean, there's lots of low and mid-income units across Pine Street, but then there's some higher end units on the big hillside above the Tacoma Mall. We're talking about both kinds of both affordable and market rate housing then?
Definitely. I and the rest of the council are very interested in affordable housing and workforce housing. So there's a lot of policy development in that plan about how to continue to accommodate this place for folks of all income levels. Very aware of displacement, and so want to make sure that we can accommodate these places. And as we grow and make more compact places, how do we make them humane for people? So there's a lot of really, I think, interesting elements about green space and recreation areas and community assets to make this a really people-centered urban neighborhood.
Right. Well, now we kind of touched on an area that I think is really relevant to this region, and is certainly something rare for Tacoma, and that is the discussion going on about the rapid increase in rents and housing prices in Tacoma. We've seen it happen in Seattle, and we've seen a lot of folks move from Seattle to Tacoma and Tacoma area because of being pushed out of Seattle on affordability. But now we're hearing unprecedented rate increases in terms of rent. The Tacoma Housing Authority is concerned about how it's going to meet its needs in the future. This is certainly something that Tacoma hasn't dealt with a lot of in the past.
Yeah, it's a big issue, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. As always, in any difficult, challenging public policy area that has macroeconomic pressures bearing down on the challenge, it's going to take lots of different solutions, carefully tailored, and then constant adaptive management. There's not going to be one bill that we can pass that's going to make the place affordable overnight. I wish those ideas existed. They don't. But we're going to have to really look at our policies about how we support affordable housing and constantly adaptively manage. I'm hearing the concern about displacement from Tacoma because of rising rents, and I take that really, really seriously. And I know this council is ready to roll up their sleeves, take the issue head on, and figure out what we need to be doing to address those issues. One thing that is happening is we do have a lot more cranes in the sky right now, building a lot more housing units. Bringing more housing supply into the market will help some. That's not the only solution, but I think that is one big one, is to bring more housing supply into the market, and we are working to pave the way for that.
And you talked about 8,000 people going to be living in the near future in the Tacoma Mall area. That's a small number compared to the region, which I know you're involved in a lot of the regional planning. There's 1 million more people coming to the Puget Sound, the 4-county Puget Sound area, Pierce, King, Snohomish, and Kitsap counties. They all have to live somewhere here too. And fitting those folks all in that we know are coming and dealing with how to get them around in the region is a major challenge.
It is, and that's why I spend so much time on behalf of the city on regional planning. This is a great place to live, and our economy is headed in the right direction, and it's an absolutely wonderful place to live. That's why we all choose to live here. And so there's not going to be gates on either side of I-5. They're going to keep the people out. So how do we direct that growth? How do we fit that growth to still have such a spectacular place to live, address our congestion issues, and still be able to move around the region in some semblance of sanity are issues that I spent a lot of time on, because the growth is coming. There's nothing we can do to stop it. So it's in our interest to focus it and make sure it works for us to the best of our ability.
And that's why places like Point Ruston are really important, because there's a lot of housing component there. But if you look at this picture in downtown Tacoma, there's not a lot of vacant spaces in this picture, but there is vacant property in downtown Tacoma. Tacoma could absorb a lot of housing in the downtown area without the displacement kinds of questions and things that people are fearful of in neighborhoods.
Exactly. So the work that we're doing to plan for the future about growth, it is really important to protect our single-family neighborhoods. Our single-family neighborhoods are really important and really special here. Another reason why people choose to live in Tacoma. And so we have lots of appropriate areas, like in the downtown, that can accept a lot of compact growth. And that is where we're working to direct a lot of that growth, so that we can make these wonderful communities for people, accept that growth, and protect our single-family neighborhoods.
Now, we also, as the people can see the photo behind us, they also know that there's a building there with lights on in the photograph that will be shutting the lights off again soon. It's a nice, beautiful Class A office building built in the last 30 years, but will soon be empty. It's not the first time it's been empty. Tacoma has lost some downtown employers recently. You have any thoughts about how do we turn that part around? Because that's an important part of this equation. If all these people are moving here, it'd be best if they could take a bus to work or walk to work and didn't have to get on a freeway and spend an hour and a half trying to get 30 miles.
Exactly right? So 40% of Tacoma and Pierce County residents travel north or south to work every single day. No wonder why the freeways are clogged and it takes an hour and a half on a good day to get from Tacoma to downtown Seattle. And that doesn't even count the time from getting to your house to the freeway. So we have a lot of work to do to continue to attract more employers. There are a lot of mid-sized firms that are choosing Tacoma, companies like Infoblox, other technology companies that are great paying jobs here, defense contractors. So this is a great place to do business. And I think the opening of this Class A office space, we have to rethink it. Maybe it might not be just one mega employer like State Farm. Maybe it's 15 different good paying jobs in this really large downtown Class A office space that's bringing new life, great paying jobs to Tacoma, so folks can live and work closer to Tacoma. So while I'm sad to see State Farm leave downtown Tacoma, they were a very good corporate partner. I think it opens up an opportunity to maybe recruit lots of different companies into one building. Again, we have to make sure our economy is resilient, and one of the ways that we make sure it's resilient is we don't just focus on one and only one industry, and that we don't just have one or two big businesses that are the only jobs in town. We need to diversify the kinds of jobs and the kinds of companies that are here in order to remain resilient long into our economic future.
Now, you're a citywide council member, not representing a district, but so you can have a little global perspective about this. I think the deputy mayor was here recently, and there's some of this housing growth beginning to occur in his district. Now, we'll talk about council member and deputy mayor Ibsen. We've seen some in the Proctor district. We're beginning to see some more density occurring in some of the other parts of the city where it has only seems to have been downtown and in the Tacoma Mall area in the past. Do you get the calls like the district council members get? Because people have mixed views about that. They want new things in their communities, but they don't necessarily always want it when it actually shows up.
Yeah, there are real challenges to growth. I acknowledge them and see them firsthand myself, and so we need to pretend like they don't exist. We need to understand that they do exist. There's real challenges. More people comes more congestion, transportation challenges, affordable housing challenges. Where's the open space so people don't feel like they're piled on top of each other? So these are real challenges of growth that we gotta take head on and address. We've made it really easy, as we should, for constituents to contact and interact with their council members. We're working on figuring out how to do that even better. So I do get that communication because of how easy it is to connect with us, as I'm glad it is, because I do my job better when I understand what our constituents are concerned about.
All right. The other thing that I know has been in the news recently, so I want to get your thoughts on, is an issue that kind of continued over from 2017 to 2018, is the future of CLIC. And you've begun with the utility board, okay, it's a new year, we're going to take a new approach to this question that we've wrestled with for a couple of years. Community has some really strong views on CLIC. So what are your thoughts going into this new approach regarding the future of CLIC?
So I'm open-minded as I usually am on major policy issues, to make sure I'm learning and hearing all sides. I have some core principles about most things, including CLIC, and my bottom line is it should not get sold. It should not get privatized. The long-term ownership of the CLIC broadband asset is really important, not necessarily for cable television, but the broadband internet is essential to a 21st century life, right? To check your kids' grades and interact with a teacher, to do homework, to interact in our economy, to run your life. It is absolutely essential. So keeping it public is really important to me. So I'm particularly interested in this telecommunications utility concept. How can we stand up a standalone utility like power and water and the other utilities the city owns and manages? How can we have our own utility so that the financial books and all the management are focused on that entity? And how can that be run for the good of Tacoma? Whether or not you're a Click customer, everyone benefits from this municipally owned broadband system, right? It is demonstrated that even if you're, say, a Comcast customer, the rates you pay as a Comcast customer are 20% lower than in other markets like Seattle, Bellevue. Why? Because there is fixed competition. There's a public option that drives competition, which drives rates low, that you do not see in other markets in Washington state. So there are lots and lots of public interest reasons to support and make sure we have a public Click public broadband option, and that's just one of them.
All right, and I think the other interesting argument on that is when Click was created, it was about cable television, and broadband was just sort of this little piece of it that might grow into something. Well, it certainly has now eclipsed the importance cable television. And I think the idea of public ownership of that is important for what we don't know right now that broadband could do. Some service that no one's envisioned yet or created yet that will ride that system is another reason why having it in public control is more important than just taking it on, well, the whims of the market, deciding whether some people get it and some don't.
I couldn't agree more. We don't know what we don't know.
Right.
20 years ago when we created Click, the internet wasn't really in existence, at least not for average folks like you and I. Maybe the military was using it, or parts of the government were using it perhaps, but not average folks. And look what's happened 20 years hence. So the innovation is constant. The only thing that is constant is change, and the asset, I think, is going to remain essential. And 20 years from now, we're going to look back and say, "Gosh, it's really great that we were able to preserve that public option, so we can control our own destiny."
All right, so those are the kind of really big issues that kind of held over from 2017 into the new council. You have some new members who are getting their feet wet and learning what room to go to and all that kind of stuff, things that you had to do yourself a few years back. Are there dynamics that you think will change with the new mayor and some brand new council members I think in each case it's their, well, not in the case of Catherine Ushka, but the other cases it's their first elective office. Are you thinking that things will change, dynamics will change, or what do you expect out of the different makeup of the council? So,
of course, new people bring new personalities. I'm loving working with these new council members. They're energetic, they're focused on solving problems, they're collaborative, they ask great questions, they're very, very smart. So, I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with them. The atmosphere is incredibly collegial, very much focused on finding solutions to problems. And, when we happen to disagree from time to time on a path forward, those disagreements are incredibly professional, and trying to really seek to understand where there's disagreements, that we can find that common ground and move forward together. So I'm excited to work with this group, and so far so great.
Okay. I saw some social media chatter recently about the council's procedures, and one of the comments that got a few responses was about unanimous votes. And I not the first time I've heard this kind of criticism, as though the council getting along with each other is a bad thing. And I pointed out that for all the partisanship in the legislature, 50% or more of the votes that the legislature takes are unanimous. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the fact that you go through committee processes and study sessions, and just like the legislative process does, goes through committee hearings and all. Issues and questions get vetted before the vote occurs, all in public. So it really shouldn't come as a surprise when things get unanimous votes.
That's my assessment. We work issues hard. If it's a very challenging, somewhat controversial issue, it gets worked for months, sometimes years. And we do try to find that compromise and work out those kinks throughout the legislative process. Not everything passes on a 9-0 vote. Every year there's a series of votes where there happens to be some disagreement. So the trick is, how to disagree professionally and not turn into the ridiculous, immature and unproductive behavior that we see in the other Washington, where there's just stalemate because of personality conflicts. So we do work productively. There's not always a unanimous vote, but largely when it is, it's because either it's super straightforward and there's no reason for a divided vote, or it's been worked out in a detailed way.
Right. Before I worked for the city, I actually covered the city as a broadcast journalist, and there was criticism back in the era of 5-4 votes. There was continuous 5-4 votes on the city council. Oh, why can't they get along? Why can't they work to get things out better? And of course, growing out of a lot of that was the city's committee structure, the change it to how the study sessions worked and what kind of briefings the council got, with that whole idea that if people were a little more informed and had a little more time, they wouldn't act. The first time you actually get to decide something is the actual council vote.
Exactly.
That's why you wind up with 5-4 votes,
yep.
and people getting angry.
Yep.
I just think people working together is a good thing.
Yep. And I completely understand it, right? Most of the public thinks we show up at 5 o'clock at night on a Tuesday and vote on things, and that's the first time we've ever contemplated it, when in fact, likely it's been vetted for months, if not over a year. We've read about it, we've had discussions about it, we've had committee meetings about it. So when it gets to a 5 p.m. Tuesday meeting, we've thought about it a lot. So that is what happens. But I understand that most folks that's the most public part. That's what the newspaper covers. That's what's on TV. So it's completely understandable that the public doesn't really see the rest of the process. It's completely transparent and open, but the news media doesn't have the capacity to track all of the many steps behind the scenes. So it's really understandable that the public really only sees the tail end of a process.
Right. Well, we have to leave it there. But thank you for being here today with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Randy.
All right. Our guest has been City Council Member Ryan Mello. We look forward to seeing you next time here on Inside Tacoma.